I'm Doug Cross, Chairman of the Tomaree Museum Association, and today I'm interviewing Jack Bartlett. Now Jack is ex-Navy, he's nearly 100, he's actually 100, he's 99, he will turn 100 on the 23rd of November in a couple of months' time. So welcome Jack.
Thank you.
I'm going to ask you a little bit about your earlier life and then about your Navy career, and in particular we're interested in your experiences when you were posted to the Manoora, which worked out of Port Stephens in Elson Bay.
Yep.
So tell me Jack, where were you born and what was your family history? A little bit.
I was born in Ganmain in the Cottage Hospital on the 29th of November 1923. I had 5 sisters. I was born. About 18 months later, my brother Jim was born, and there was 7 Bartletts. And Dad, all through to the Depression, was never out of work because he had his own. He was a teamster, cutting hay from the cockies paddocks into the big chaff mill at Ganmain, owned by Miller and Murphy, where it was cut into chaff, bagged and sent by rail, because in the 30s very, very few motor cars, no trucks at all, it was all horses. And we had a horse ourselves for our own use. We had 2 ponies and a big 4-wheeled buggy. And when we was kids and used to go on holidays, load all the Bartletts and all our camping gear. One year we'd go to Wagga on the Murrumbidgee, and the next year we'd go to the other way to Narrandera on the Murrumbidgee. And I grew up there and went to school there until I was 10. And when I was 10 in 1934, little trucks could carry about 4 ton of hay, where Dad would take all day to bring in one big load of about 10. They could do 2 or 3 quick trips. And Dad had a 20 draft horses in a paddock up from us.
And I suppose the horses were well trained.
And Dad used to make his own horseshoes, and I grew up working the bellows to heat the iron, and Dad would make his own shoes and shoe his own horses of a Saturday afternoon.
And you were around about 10 or 12 then, I guess?
I was 10.
So how old were you when you what was your first job? Paid job. I'm not talking about working for Dad, but when you were actually getting paid.
When I earned money, I left school when I turned 14, and I got a job at a chemist shop. I had a push bike, and you could ring up the chemist and say, I need this, and for 6pence a trip, I'd go down to the chemist, pick up the Aspros or whatever, and deliver it to the houses. And next door to him was a grocer, and he said to me, is that your bike? I said, yes. How would you like to work for me? How much? £1 a week, $2. Oh, and in them, a millionaire, £1! Couldn't get there quick enough. And of course, in them days, the working week was 44 hours. You done your 5 8 hours, and from 8 o'clock till midday, Saturdays. Saturday afternoon we just play cricket. Sundays off to church and wait for Monday to go to work again.
So when the World War started in 1939, you'd have been about 16?
I was 16, and I was sitting home and listening. We had a little battery radio, and I can still remember as if it was today. Bob Menzies said it was about 9 o'clock at night. England is at war with Germany. And that was on the 3rd of September 1939. And I thought, well, here's a go. Free boots,
Right.
free clothes, proper tucker, because we grew up pretty...
But you were only 16, wasn't
Oh,
it? Too
yes,
young to join?
Yeah, and they laughed at me. Go away, grow up. So I grew up, and in the process I sneaked my age up a little bitty and joined the army to put on a bit of weight. And in September 1942, I transferred the Royal Australian Navy Reserve, and as I'd been a soldier, my training was limited because I knew how to...
So they shortened your training.
Oh, yeah. And there was 2 ordinary seamen, myself, an ordinary seaman, Doug Lyle, went to the Manoora, and she was in Garden Island, being transferred from our merchant cruiser when I went on her into a landing ship infantry.
Right, so let me just say the HMAS Manoora was your first posting to a ship
Yep.
in the Navy, and it was an ocean liner owned by the Adelaide Steam
Yes.
Company, built in Scotland in 1935 for the Cairns to Fremantle run, but it was requisitioned in 1939, about the time that you were, well, 3 years before you were posted to it,
Yep.
requisitioned by the Royal Australian Navy, converted to an armed merchant cruiser.
That is so.
In 1942, around about the time that you were, just before you were posted to it, was converted to a landing ship infantry, and it was involved in most of Allied amphibious operations and landings in the Pacific in 1944 to 45 when you were on it. So I guess you would have seen a lot of action with the Manoora, a lot of amphibious operations.
The 9 big landings, I was there on the 4-inch gun,
Right.
anti-aircraft gun, on the
That was your first job on the Manoora, was it? As a gunner?
gunner, yeah.
Tell us a little bit about that. Like, how did that work? And how did you get trained on that? Did you actually use live firings? To train?
Well, when I went down to Flinders to transfer to the Navy, you done how to slope arms and marching, yippee.
Yep.
And they said, well, what do you want to be? I said, what's that over there? They said, a gunner, that's for me. So I learned to be part of a gun's crew.
Right.
And in a gun's crew, a 4-inch gun, 8 sailors.
So 8 for each gun. You
Yes.
each had a role to play.
Yeah,
Each had a job.
one to train it round,
Yeah.
one to make it up and down, and the rest give them the ammunition.
To load it.
Yeah, and the 4-inch shells too. And you put them on your arm and you went swoosh.
Pushed her in.
And then the captain of the drum got hold of what they called the BM lever, pulled the lever around, the breech block locked and go bang.
And he fired it, did he?
And you could get away about 12 shells a minute, a good crew.
Wow.
And we were
12 a minute. You were a good crew.
We were a crackerjack crew, yes. Yes.
Wow, that's a lot. That's a
And
lot
as
of
well
firing.
as that, our first landing barges came from England, and they were the same barges, more or less, that the Anzacs used in 1915. And to get onto the beach, you had to drive the barge up on, and the soldiers jump out into the water and walk. And when the Americans come, they said, "Oh, give us a break." And they bought with them what they call Chris-craft. They were bigger. They're about 30 foot long, and the coxswain steering there, a bloke with a heavy machine gun there, the big motor here, and the fellow that drove the motor, when the barge hit the beach, the ramp went down and you just walked out and you never...
You never even got your feet wet.
No. And we had 25 of those barges, on board.
So let me just explain, or you can explain to me, the HMAS Manoora as an infantry landing ship. It didn't actually go to the beach. It stood off the beach, but you had these barges on hoists up each side of the ship,
Yeah,
and they
hanging
lowered
on
them
the
down.
side and you had to lift them out.
Yeah, with all the troops already on them,
No,
and you lowered them down, or did you lower them down first
No,
and then put
the
the troops
barges
on?
went down
Yeah,
and what they call scrambling nets. And the
right.
soldiers was all, we trained them at Port Stephens.
Yeah.
In their turn, come up, the barge would pull in, they'd hop over and clamber down these nets, fill them, and we had to get as close to the beach so they got less chance of getting shot
Getting
by
shot
the
in
Jap.
the barges on the way
And
in.
we was the first in and the closest, and behind us were the destroyers, behind them the cruisers, and behind them the battleships.
Right.
And they used to fire over us and wonk the beaches.
And you hope that they weren't short with their firing, correct?
You could hear them whistling, whoosh, 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 oh.
As long as you could hear them going over, that's all right.
Yeah. When you heard them, you were safe.
Yeah, but it's the one you don't hear that's
The ones you didn't hear, yeah, we never got one.
never got one of those.
And our first sailors were trained at Port Stephens. The Navy had a Royal Australian Navy depot there called
HMAS Assault.
Assault. And there's still remnants. I was up there a couple of years ago. And there's an obelisk, say that from
is.
this.
I was going to ask you about that because my notes here tell me, you can correct me if I've got this wrong, but I believe Manoora, once it became an instrument landing infantry, or landing ship infantry, LSI they call it, and it trained for amphibious landings. They did that training in Port Stephens, and I believe they were there from March to October in 1943. Is that correct? Around about that period? That's about, what, 6-8 months, I guess?
Yeah.
And that's where they did the training, and on the beaches at Shoal Bay.
Yes.
And you were on the ship then. So what was your role during that period in
Well,
1943?
I had two roles. On the barges on the side, as I was on the aft 4-inch gun. Barge 12, when they piped away all boats, I had to lower with an electric winch that barge down into the water.
Right.
And the first Americans that we trained, and they were ordinary, well, they called themselves pony soldiers. They were the first Dismounted Texas Cavalry.
Right.
Half had never seen the ocean, and they came on the Mariposa to Nelson Bay,
Port Stephens, yeah.
camped up in which is now Port
HMAS Assault,
Stephens.
yeah. A gang camp, probably.
Yes, and we were there one day, and this young bloke come up to me and said, "You're white." I said, "Oh, so why?" He said, "Well, my school teacher told me when you go to Australia, they're all black. They'll speak a little bit of gibberish. They won't have any shops. They are reapers and gatherers." And I said, "Well, that's a lot of rubbish." He said, "Well, can I take your photo?" "What for?" He said, "Because I got to send this back to my school teacher. He won't believe me." And he said, "What do you use for barter?" "Well, I've never heard of barter." I said, "Go into the shop, you want a loaf of bread, you get the money." He said, "That's money." "Of course it's money, what the bloody hell?" "Well," he said, "show me." He said, "Will you give me that?" I said, "Well, I'll tell you what, I give him a penny, a threepence, a sixpence, a shilling, and 2 shillings.
And you give me a couple of American dollars.
I said, "What are you going to do?" He said, "Well, they will never believe me in San Antonio, Texas if I go home,
And tell them that all Australians aren't black and speak
They're not black.
Aborigine.
They speak good English.
And
they got money.
They've got a currency. Well, that's amazing, isn't it?
They're the first dismounted Texas Cavalry unit.
There you go.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
Never been out of...
No.
Never seen it till they come to Australia. Matter of fact, never heard of Australia. We had 600 sailors, split into 3 watches, and you done 4 hours on and 4 hours off, and to make that you didn't do the same time day and night, at 4 o'clock till 8 o'clock they had the 2 dog watches. Instead of 4-hour watches, you done 2 hours. And that split it so that
Split you up. Yeah.
you went
So
roundy.
Did you have to hot bunk your bunks, or did you each have your own hammock?
Each had your own hammock, and you got up in the morning, lashed it up, and stacked it in the hammock bins in the corner of the mess.
Right. Now, hang on. I want to ask you a little bit about during that period in 1943 in Nelson Bay, Port Stephens. There were some shops, and you did have currency. So when you Navy blokes were given some time off on weekends or whenever, and you came ashore, what did you do for entertainment?
Well, the only entertainment was every second Saturday we would get in an army truck. There wasn't that bridge there then, and you got in the barge and we get into Newcastle and have lunch. Stay there the afternoon about 8 or 9 o'clock. Come back out and spend the next 2 weeks
On the ship?
on the ship.
Well, I heard, I've spoken to some other members of the Defence Force back in there. We had a radar station at Nelson Bay on Nelson Head.
Yeah.
We also had one in Stockton, and I believe they used to have a dance at Stockton. And the girls that ran the radar station used to meet up with some of you blokes
yes.
at the dance. Is that true?
Matter of fact, one night, about 10 o'clock, he said the dance is shut. And they said, hang on. We paid $2 bob to get in, we want our $2 bob's worth. And a big melee started. And in the fight with the Newcastle Constabulary, I lost my hat, but somewhere along the line, I ended up with a full box of tomatoes. And I come back on board, and the officer at the top of the deck said, "Where's your hat?" I said, "Oh God, no. What have you got there?" I said, "They were laying in the street," so I thought, "Gee, they look good." What are they? What do you go? I said, "We're going to have tomatoes on toast." He said, "Well, you make sure I get a couple of them tomatoes." So for breakfast next morning, I said, "Here's your 2. And in our mess, in each mess, there were 20. And you had a long table and 10 each side. And you sat on a stool, and the food was brought from the galley to each mess in turn.
Yep.
And that's how you lived.
And that morning you had fresh tomatoes on toast.
And after the
Thanks to
big
you.
fight of Stockton that night,
The big fight of Stockton, because you couldn't get into the dance. And they were trying to
So
steal
the
your
next
$2 bob.
week when they went to get on the barge, they said, "Are you mob off the Manoora?" Go on. They wouldn't let us back into Newcastle.
So
They reckon we're a team of larrikins.
You were banned from the Newcastle,
Yeah.
not just the dance, the whole of the town of Newcastle. Well,
Yeah.
that's a bit rough.
Yeah. Anyway, that's what happened.
But what about in Nelson Bay itself? Were there any shops in those days? Or?
No, nothing.
Nothing.
No. All bush and jungle, and just that little shoppy at Port Stephens. There were quite a few oyster farmers over there then,
Yes.
and you could go and
Buy some oysters.
buy oysters.
Probably crayfish too. Probably lobsters.
Yeah. But what amazed me, and I'd never, was jellyfish.
Yes.
Massive big jellyfish. And at that time, the Japanese submarines were very active, and they sunk 30-odd merchant ships between Cairns and Bass Strait.
Right.
And to protect us, we had a big steel net
Right.
with a big boom gate, and a tug used to come from Newcastle, hook on, and just like opening a door,
Yeah.
it would open the great big boom gate so we could get out into the ocean
Yeah.
to teach these blokes from jumping onto horses to jumping into landing barges up onto the beach
Yeah.
and do that. And each lot, we had them for 2 weeks,
Right.
and we trained them there. And then after the Battle of the Coral Sea, when the American Marines had taken back to Solomon's Guadalcanal, and that's the furthest south the Japs came. So we then moved from Port Stephens up to Cairns,
Yes.
and we trained the rest of them there. They camped up on the tablelands, and instead of Port Stephens, we trained them on Trinity Beach
Yeah.
at Cairns, and went to the first big landing at an island called Seo. And that was the first action we took part in.
Right. Before you get to the action there, let me just ask you this. I've read that in some of the landings on those landing craft, it's important to get them as close to the beach as possible, because in a couple of cases, I think to book a few of those places where the landing craft didn't get in close enough, they hit a reef and the guys jumped off with their rifles and ammo, and if they're over 7 foot of water, they just drown. So you need to get in closer.
That was the worst I ever seen, mass drownings.
Yes.
We were at Morotai. We went from Seo to Humboldt Bay in Dutch New Guinea, up through the Celebes, and because what the American aircraft carriers wouldn't come within bomber range of Japanese bombs.
Right.
So to protect us, we had to capture airfields. And after the 3 landings in the Philippines, we rejoined the American 7th Fleet to capture the Borneo oil ports.
Right.
Without oil,
Don't go anywhere. Yeah.
and we were training this Saturday afternoon at Morotai with the 48th Battalion, the 9th Division, and behind each landing barge they were towing these engineering, that they were a flat thing you stood in and pulled the sides up and it become a little, like a canoe.
Yeah.
And in each of these canoes there were 10 soldiers, and the soldiers all they were the best of the best, first ashore, all Owen gunners.
Right. These little boats were powered by a diesel motor with it?
No, we towed them.
Oh, you towed them,
Our
right.
barge
You towed them.
towed them.
Gotcha.
And this afternoon, 3 or 4 of them come together and tipped these soldiers
Out.
into about a couple hundred foot of water, and they sunk like a stone because they had
much
their
weight.
Owen gun
Yes.
strapped to them, their belts of ammo,
Yeah.
and that afternoon there was 33 drowned.
Gee, that's
Who would
terrible.
have landed at Tarakan,
That's terrible.
the first of the Borneo. And
Wow.
on our ship we lose either odd one. But
To lose that many in one day would be
was
a horrific
yeah,
experience
the
for
worst.
everybody.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes,
terrible.
yes. And of course when you lost a sailor at sea, they were buried at 8 o'clock every morning before the morning watch.
Yeah.
they were put in a shroud, sewed up with a 4-inch cartridge between their legs so that when they
didn't float.
They sunk
Sank straight
and
away.
instead of a grave, all you got, there's a cross, latitude, longitude, able seaman so-and-so
Yeah.
is there. And that's all their relation.
I'm sure in the time you were there, you would have lost the odd mate or two.
Oh yeah,
Terribly sad.
happens, wars happens.
Yeah, exactly.
Lucky, I'm still
And
here.
you're still here, and you're 100 on the 23rd of November. In a
3
couple of
months' time I will be 100,
Yeah.
and I'm the last living member of HMAS Manoora, 1942, and I left her in March 1946. I'm
That's
the last of the living.
Last of the Mohicans, as they say in the
last of the
classics.
Mohicans.
So, tell me a little bit more about your training, because you started off as a member of the 4-inch gunner team, but you did a lot more after that.
Yes, I had very good eyes, so I, above the 4-inch gun was the range taker. We never had radar in them early days, so I could get on the range, which was about 25 foot long, 2 big optics on the end, and I could count down from about 20 mile out planes, and I used to shout out, so many miles, open fire now.
Give them a target, yeah.
Yeah.
And you got quite accurate at that, I
Oh,
suspect.
number 1, yeah.
No, well, that's great.
And in the 9th of February 1945, we just put the Americans ashore in Lingayen Gulf, north of Manila, and there's 5 Japanese kamikazes come round and circled. 3 were shot down by American Air Force. 1 tried to hit the Chicago, and the Chicago blew it up, and the 5th one was coming straight for us. And in the book you'll see there, able seaman Cyril Whiteman was he on the big machine gun on the bridge, Manoora, and I'm shouting to him, he's coming, he's open fire. And Cyril shot him when he was about 200 feet. And we all seen it. Hit this Japanese pilot and hit him with a full berth. And instead of hitting us, as he died, he went back and over us. And of course I'm on the range taker. And the captain says, "Jump, Jack, jump!" I never had a gun then, I was counting. And I jumped and twisted my left knee. And from that, I retired when I turned 60. And on the Christmas Eve this year, I will have been 40 years on a Royal Australian Navy pension with a gold card.
You got a gold card because of that knee, that
Yeah.
Well, some good come out of it, but I'll tell you what, your mate, I think you said his name was Cyril,
Yeah.
who shot that. Well, what a good aim he had.
Yeah,
He went under a lot of
in
pressure.
the book, and
Yeah.
he was awarded the Distinguished Conduct Medal.
Fantastic.
I said, "What did you get?" I said, "A crook knee."
No, you got a gold card.
Most importantly.
And let me just have a look at this, because now if I can show this here, now we've got, these are some of your medals,
Yeah.
war medals. This one, I believe, was presented to you from the Philippine government.
Yes, about 25 years ago I got a letter from the Philippine Consul General to attend State Parliament House in Macquarie Street, and my daughter came with me.
Your daughter Narelle?
Narelle,
Yeah.
and I was presented with that medal. The Philippine Liberation Medal was 3 stars,
Right.
because I was the last of the Mohicans
Yep.
who'd been to Leyte Gulf, Lingayen Gulf, and Corregidor, Manila.
Right.
the 3 big battles.
And those campaign medals will be here. So these are all campaign medals,
yeah.
and you've been in, geez, I can count at least half a dozen there.
There's 8 medals.
Yeah, and are these 2 here?
Yep. In World War II, we were given stars.
Yes.
But after everything else, they were medals.
They were medals, yes. That's fantastic. Unbelievable. And congratulations on that. But the other thing too is this medallion here. There's not many of these about. 1939 to 1945 medallion. Australia remembers. It says on there with the red poppy.
Yeah, yeah.
What's that about?
Well,
how did you get that?
2 years ago, 75 years after the end of World War II.
Yep.
Yep, to get that medallion from the Governor General. Yeah, it'll
Yep.
come out. Give it a flick.
I'm trying to get it out, but there we go. Look at that.
You had to be in action when the war ended, and we were just taken back
In 1945. Yep.
Balikpapan,
Yep.
and you had to be alive 75 years later, which I obviously...
Which you passed. Yes.
Yeah. And I got that presented to me, and that's my war collection.
Fantastic. And I happen to have a photograph of you when you first joined the army.
Yep.
To try and put on some weight to get transferred to the Navy. I'm
Yeah.
just getting a shot of that. Fantastic. Looking quite dapper over here in your civvies.
Yep, when I was young.
Yeah.
And then, one of my most memorable days, I turned 21, training the Americans who were going to land at Lingayen, and we sailed back, and in Christmas 1944, my squadron assembled at Manus, and we had Christmas Day 1944 at Manus. And when we picked these American soldiers, they'd been over Honiara in the Solomons, and we bought them and trained them. And while we was over there, we had a big demijohn, and we tipped all the acid out, and we filled it with water, spud peelings, apple peelings, raisins, anything that would ferment, and we strained it and strained it and strained it, and come Christmas Day 1944, we were all given a bottle of beer, which was like winning a lotto without buying a ticket, because we were dry shipped. And we were having lunch, and this big American came down, and he said, can I have a glass of beer? I said, no. We only get one a year. I said, but I'll give you...
A glass of this fruit punch.
He said, it's only water. No. Anyway, he wolfed it down, and as he drank it, his eyes rolled back in his head, and he shook. And I said, I told him what it was. And he couldn't talk for about 10 minutes. It was practically pure alcohol, that's what I told you. Yeah. He said, you buggers drink that, and you take it. I said, sure. I said, yeah, but we don't drink it like you did. Where'd you get it? I said, we made it. I told him how we made it. Cup of coconut.
Well, that's amazing.
In a big old acid jar.
Being American, he should be used to that. They've made a fair, I think they've had some illegal distilleries over there a few times, especially during the Depression.
We made our own.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, happy days.
Oh, that is happy. I guess you did have, I know you had some sad times during the war, but you did have some happy days. And I guess you made some good mates. Did you have a best mate in the Navy?
Yeah, Johnny Matthews.
Yeah.
We were in the same guns crew, and when I loaded boat 12, he was on boat 6.
Right.
And they'd pipe away all boats, and he loaded, and we were together all during the war, but unfortunately he died.
Did he die during the war?
No,
after the war, right?
After
okay.
the war.
But you kept in touch, I guess.
Oh yeah, we used to every Anzac Day.
Yeah.
We used to meet in Sydney in March. And when the virus come and I couldn't live on my own, I come up here to live with my daughter.
Yeah.
And 3 Anzac days passed. I was standing up the top of the steps, and these 2 young 8, 9 years, and they said, "Is that right, you were a World War II sailor?" I said, "Yes, I was." They said, "Well, my dad would like to come up and shake hands." And from that, meeting them 2 kids, last Anzac Day up the top of the street, it was estimated there was 500 people come to say good day to me.
Yeah.
There was that many. The fire brigade came and blocked the street off. The first aid sent 4 first aiders in case somebody, and they all said hooray for the old fella.
Well, that is
Yeah.
fantastic.
Yeah.
Well, look, I think you've given us some great stories. I know you've got a lot more, but from the Tomaree Museum Association, I want to thank you, Mr. Jack Bartlett, because it's been an absolute privilege and an honour to talk to you today.
Been a pleasure.
Thanks very much.
When I think of all them sailors, all gone, I'm the last. And we had, in my squadron, about 2,000. I'm the last.